What if the people we admire most aren't the winners, but the ones who never stop trying? Stop chasing trophies and start celebrating courage, the real measure of greatness.
Victory is fleeting, but effort lasts forever. Who deserves your applause today?
We grow up being taught that success is about winning. The highest grades, the biggest trophies, the promotions, the gold medals, the accolades, they become the markers we chase from childhood. We are applauded when we come first, when we outperform, when we are better than the rest. Somewhere along the way, the story of success became about victory alone. Yet if we look more deeply, if we pause to truly understand what shapes greatness, we find that success is not defined by a medal, a score, or a title. Success is about the act of doing, the courage of stepping forward, the willingness to try when the outcome is uncertain. Winning is temporary. It fades. Effort endures. Think about the athletes who train for years, waking up before sunrise, pushing their bodies and minds beyond limits, often without anyone watching. For most of them, there is no gold medal waiting at the finish line. The majority never stand on a podium. And yet, does that mean they are not successful? Absolutely not. Their success is not in being crowned the fastest or the strongest, but in the commitment they make to the process. They embody success because they did something most of us will never do. They showed up, they put in the work, and they kept going. True success is not an event. It is not a singular moment frozen in time where someone stands above the rest. True success is built day by day, in the small choices, the repeated efforts, the moments when quitting would be easier, but persistence wins. Winning may give recognition, but doing gives meaning. The act of doing defines character, builds resilience, and creates growth. Winning is simply a byproduct, a snapshot in time, but doing, showing up, and giving your best effort is the real legacy. Our culture has glorified winners so much that we often miss the deeper story. We admire the person holding the trophy, but rarely celebrate the hundreds of competitors who stood on the same field, each with their own story of effort, sacrifice, and determination. We focus on the one who crossed the line first, but ignore the countless others who ran the same distance with equal passion and commitment. If we only honor the winner, we dismiss the value of the journey, and the journey is where the true lessons live. Look at the innovators, the artists, the entrepreneurs who risk everything for an idea. Most of them will never become household names. Many will fail publicly, some repeatedly, but failure does not erase the success of action. Success is in the attempt. It is in the courage to bring an idea into the world, even if it doesn't land the way you hoped. Every great invention we celebrate today stands on the shoulders of countless attempts that didn't work. The light bulb wasn't a success the first time. Flight wasn't achieved in a single attempt. Behind every great win is an ocean of doing, of trying, of failing, of persisting. When we shift the definition of success from winning to doing, something profound happens. We remove the fear of failure. We create room for growth. Because when winning is the only metric, failure feels final. But when doing becomes the measure, every step forward, no matter how small, becomes success. That reframes the entire game of life. Suddenly, success is not a destination, but a practice. It is not something you achieve once and hold forever, but something you live every day by simply choosing to act. Think of a musician learning their instrument. If success is defined only by winning an award or performing on the biggest stage, most will never feel successful. But if success is redefined as the act of playing, of improving, of expressing oneself through music, then every practice session, every new note mastered, every audience, no matter how small, becomes a celebration of success. The beauty lies not in the recognition, but in the doing. This shift in perspective is not just motivational, it is deeply practical. In organizations, in schools, in families, when we only reward outcomes, we create environments where people avoid risk. They play it safe, they aim only for the achievable, they avoid failure at all costs. But when we reward effort, persistence, and courage, people are free to stretch themselves. They try new things, they innovate, they dare to do what others might not. Over time, this doesn't just create more doers, it creates more winners as well. That the focus is healthier. Winning becomes a result of effort, not the definition of success itself. Redefining success in this way changes how we see ourselves. It allows us to honor the late nights spent studying even if the grade wasn't perfect, to celebrate the person who started running even if they finished last, to admire the one who spoke up even if their voice trembled. Success is not about being the best in the room, it's about having the courage to enter the room in the first place.
The irony is that the people we label as winners, the champions and leaders we admire, often don't see winning as their primary goal. They see it as an outcome of their dedication to the process. They fall in love with the doing, with the daily grind, with the effort that most people avoid. That's why they rise. They understand that success is not about a moment of recognition, but about years of unseen effort. We celebrate their wins, but they celebrate their doing. And that is why they keep moving forward, long after the spotlight has dimmed.
There is a powerful truth that often gets overlooked. Beginning is the hardest part of any journey. We all have dreams, ideas, and ambitions tucked away inside us. We imagine the things we want to achieve, the projects we want to start, the changes we want to make. Yet so often, those ideas remain just that, ideas. They sit in notebooks, in late-night conversations, in quiet moments of imagination. Why? Because beginning requires courage, the courage to step into the unknown, to risk being wrong, to open ourselves to failure and judgment. The ones who begin are not necessarily the most talented, the most prepared, or even the most confident. They are simply the ones who choose to act, despite not knowing what comes next.
Most of us wait for the perfect moment to begin. We tell ourselves that when we have more resources, when the timing is better, when we are more skilled, when the conditions align, then we will take the leap. But the truth is, there is no perfect moment. The perfect conditions we imagine never arrive. Waiting for certainty is another way of choosing not to start. And the ones who do, the ones who move before they are ready, understand that beginnings are never about perfection. They are about courage. Think about history's great pioneers, the inventors, the leaders, the artists. None of them began with guarantees. The Wright brothers didn't know if their flying machine would ever leave the ground. They risked ridicule and failure every single time they tested their designs, but they began anyway. Thomas Edison didn't know how many attempts it would take to create a working light bulb. He only knew that each trial brought him closer. He began and began again. These stories remind us that the courage to begin is what makes progress possible. Without beginning, there can be no success, no discovery, no growth. The irony is that many people admire winners, but forget that every winner once stood at the edge of uncertainty and chose to start. The gold medalist was once a beginner stepping onto the track for the first time. The best-selling author was once a person staring at a blank page. The entrepreneur was once someone with nothing more than an idea scribbled in a notebook. Winning is built on beginning. The outcome we celebrate is born from the moment of courage, where someone said, "I'll start, even though I'm not ready." The courage to begin is also an act of vulnerability. Starting something means exposing yourself to the possibility of failure. It means admitting you don't know everything, that you may stumble, that you may not succeed right away, and that is precisely why so many people never begin. Fear becomes the barrier. Fear of looking foolish, fear of criticism, fear of failure. But here is the paradox. Failure only exists for those who begin. If you never start, you may protect yourself from failure, but you also guarantee that nothing happens. The act of beginning itself is a form of success because it breaks the paralysis of fear. Consider the runner who enters their first race, knowing full well they will not win. To them, simply standing at the starting line is the victory. It is a declaration that they are no longer sitting on the sidelines. Or think about the person who speaks up in a meeting for the first time. Their voice may not change the world, but their courage to begin speaking reshapes their own story. These small beginnings matter because they ripple outward. They teach us that progress is not made in giant leaps, but in the decision to start where we are with what we have.
There's a story about a teacher who asked their students to write a page every day. Some students hesitated, waiting for inspiration, wanting to craft the perfect sentence. Others just began writing, no matter how imperfect. At the end of the year, the ones who simply began had written entire books, while those who waited for perfection were still staring at empty pages. The lesson is clear: those who begin, even imperfectly, move forward. Those who wait do not.
The courage to begin does not just change individuals, it changes cultures. In teams, in organizations, in communities, When people feel safe to start, innovation flourishes. When leaders celebrate beginnings rather than only outcomes, they create environments where people are free to try. This is where creativity is born, where ideas take shape, where breakthroughs happen. Because beginnings invite possibility, they open doors that would otherwise remain closed.
What is remarkable is that beginnings are contagious. When one person chooses to act, it inspires others to do the same. A single voice saying, "I'll go first," creates a ripple that gives permission for others to step forward. Courage multiplies when it is witnessed. And that is why the courage to begin is so important. It is not just personal, it is collective. Every great movement, every significant change began with one person who decided to take the first step.
Yet we often underestimate the value of these first steps because they look small from the outside. A child raising their hand in class, a writer publishing their first blog, a friend reaching out for help. These may seem ordinary, but they carry extraordinary weight. Each is an act of courage that defies fear and chooses action over hesitation. And in that moment, success is redefined, not as winning, but as beginning. The courage to begin is available to all of us. It does not belong only to the bold or the gifted. It is a choice that any one of us can make in any moment. It is the decision to step forward, even when the path ahead is uncertain, even when fear whispers its doubts. Because beginning is not about knowing the ending. It is about trusting that the act of starting is itself meaningful, that momentum will come, that clarity will follow action. The ones who begin understand that the journey matters more than the destination, that growth is born in motion, not in waiting. When people talk about success, they often highlight the breakthrough moment, the day someone won the medal, signed the deal, released the best-selling book, or stood in front of a cheering crowd. But what we rarely see are the countless days that led to that single moment. Behind every breakthrough is consistency, the quiet and often unnoticed force that shapes greatness. Success is not built in one defining act, but in the repetition of small, deliberate actions taken over and over again. Consistency is what separates fleeting effort from lasting achievement, because doing something once is easy, but showing up day after day, especially when motivation fades, requires a different kind of strength. Consistency is not glamorous. It is not celebrated in headlines or trophies. It lives in the early mornings when no one is watching, in the late nights when it would be easier to quit, in the mundane routines that others overlook. Consider the athlete who trains every single day, not just when the big game is approaching. The repetition of drills, the endless practice, the hours spent refining one small detail, all of this may seem invisible, but it is the foundation of their performance. By the time they step onto the field or the court, the consistency of their preparation has already determined the outcome. The game is simply a reflection of the work they have done in silence. The same is true for the musician who practices scales for years before performing on stage, or the writer who sits at the desk every day, even when the words don't come easily. What we call talent is often just the visible product of consistency. It is not about doing extraordinary things once, but about doing ordinary things repeatedly with commitment. That is what creates mastery, resilience, and growth. The power of consistency lies in its compounding effect. One workout won't transform your body, one day of study won't make you an expert, and one act of kindness won't change the world. But repeated daily, those same actions accumulate, creating a force far greater than the sum of their parts. Small actions, compounded consistently, become habits, and habits shape identities. A single decision to show up is powerful, but the decision to keep showing up, regardless of circumstances, transforms a person. Consistency builds trust with yourself, with others, with the process. There's also a deeper truth about consistency. It outlasts motivation. Motivation is fleeting. Some days you wake up inspired, ready to take on the world, but other days you feel tired, uninspired, or doubtful. If you rely only on motivation, your progress will always be unstable. Consistency steps in where motivation falters. It is the discipline to act, regardless of how you feel, the choice to prioritize action over emotion. Consistency creates momentum, and momentum carries you forward even on the hardest days. Think about a garden. You cannot water it once and expect it to flourish. You cannot plant seeds and walk away. Growth requires steady care, regular attention, and patience. The beauty of the garden comes not from one grand act, but from small, consistent actions repeated over time. Human growth is no different. Consistency is the watering, the tending, the daily act of nurturing. that allows potential to take root and flourish. In a culture that glorifies instant results, consistency feels overlooked. We want fast wins, shortcuts, overnight success stories, but reality doesn't work that way. The people who achieve lasting success are not those who sprint the fastest, but those who keep running long after others have stopped. They understand that progress is not measured in sudden leaps, but in steady steps. Every step may seem small, but each one brings you closer to your goal. Over time, the difference between those who keep showing up and those who give up becomes enormous. And consistency also builds resilience. When you commit to showing up regularly, you train yourself to withstand setbacks. You learn that a bad day does not erase progress, that failure is simply part of the journey, because consistency is not about perfection. It is about persistence. Missing one day does not undo the work you've done. If you return the next day, the power lies not in never faltering, but in always continuing. That mindset builds strength, both mental and emotional, that extends far beyond any single achievement.
What makes consistency even more powerful is its ripple effect. When you show up consistent, while others notice, it creates trust and reliability. A leader who consistently shows up for their team builds loyalty. A parent who consistently shows love builds security. A friend who consistently listens builds connection. Consistency is not only about personal success, it creates stability and inspiration for those around us. People learn to rely on what we do consistently, not on what we do occasionally. Consider the person who practices gratitude every day. At first, it may seem insignificant, writing down a few things they're thankful for. But over time, consistency reshapes their mindset. They begin to see the world differently, to find joy in small moments, to respond to challenges with perspective. The act is small, but the transformation is profound. This is the invisible power of consistency. It changes us gradually until one day we look back and realize how far we've come. There is a story of a man who decided to improve his health by doing just 10 push-ups a day. At first, it seemed laughably small, but he stayed consistent. 10 became 15, then 20. Months later, his strength and health had transformed. The secret was not the intensity of any one day, but the consistency of every day. This story illustrates a universal principle: consistency turns small beginnings into significant outcomes. The power of consistency is that it asks only for today. You don't need to know the entire path ahead. You don't need to be perfect or extraordinary. You just need to show up today, and then again tomorrow, and again the next day. Over time, those acts of showing up stack upon each other, building momentum, creating progress, shaping who you are becoming. Consistency is the bridge between dreams and reality, between intentions and results, between who you are and who you want to be. We live in a world that has been conditioned to recognize and reward winners. From the time we are children, the applause often goes to the one who crosses the finish line first, the one who scores the most goals, the one who achieves the highest marks. The winner gets the spotlight, the recognition, and the story written about them. But what about everyone else? What about the person who trained just as hard, who poured their heart into the same race, who showed up with equal courage but did not cross the line first? What about the individual who may not have achieved a visible outcome but demonstrated resilience, effort, and bravery in the attempt? If we only recognize winners, we miss the essence of what truly deserves celebration. Recognition must shift from outcome to effort, from victory to participation, from result to the willingness to try. Imagine a classroom where only the top student is celebrated, where only the highest grade is recognized. What message does that send to the other students? That their effort, their improvement, their persistence does not matter. When recognition is tied only to the top performer, we inadvertently discourage others from even trying. They begin to believe that if they cannot be first, it is not worth participating at all. This mindset kills creativity, stifles growth, and leaves potential untapped. But when recognition shifts, when we applaud the student who improved their score, who overcame personal struggles, who dared to ask questions, they too feel valued. And suddenly the culture of the classroom changes. It becomes a place where effort matters, where learning is celebrated, and where every step forward is honored. The same principle applies in workplaces. Often recognition is given to those who close the biggest deal or achieve the most visible success. But behind every victory is a team of people whose contributions may never be noticed. The researcher who spent hours gathering data, the assistant who kept the process organized, the colleague who encouraged others when morale was low. These individuals are rarely celebrated, yet without them, the win would never have happened. Shifting recognition means broadening our lens, choosing to celebrate the doers as much as the winners, because in truth, the winner stands on the shoulders of many doers. Shifting recognition also changes the way people engage with their work. When effort is acknowledged, people feel encouraged to keep trying, even when success is not immediate. They understand that they are valued not only for what they achieve, but for how they contribute. This builds resilience because failure no longer feels like invisibility. Failure becomes a stepping stone that is still recognized as part of the journey. In such environments, people are more willing to take risks, to innovate, to experiment, because they know that trying is itself something to be celebrated.
Consider sports. We often glorify the champion, but think of the runner who comes in last place, still pushing themselves across the finish line despite knowing they will not win. That act of finishing requires extraordinary courage, and yet it is rarely recognized. We watch it, we admire it in passing, but we do not celebrate it. And yet, isn't that act the refusal to give up, the determination to keep going, just as worthy of applause as the winner's speed? If we only celebrate those who come first, we unintentionally suggest that effort without victory is meaningless. But if we celebrate both, the winner for their achievement and the doer for their perseverance, we create a culture that values participation, courage, and resilience as much as results.
The danger of recognizing only winners is that it narrows the definition of success to something few can achieve. This creates a culture of exclusivity where only a select few are deemed worthy. But when recognition shifts, when we choose to acknowledge the courage to begin, the persistence to continue, and the consistency to keep showing up, success becomes accessible to everyone. Suddenly, recognition is no longer reserved for the few who cross the line first, but for everyone who dares to step onto the track. Shifting recognition also builds community. When we celebrate only winners, competition becomes cutthroat, and people begin to see each other as obstacles to their own recognition. But when we recognize doers, we foster an environment of mutual support. People begin to encourage one another, to admire effort, to share in each other's progress. Recognition becomes inclusive, not exclusive. And in that kind of culture, more people thrive because they feel seen, valued, and appreciated. Think of parents raising children. If they only recognize their child for winning, coming first in races, getting perfect grades, the child learns that love and validation are conditional on performance. But if the parent recognizes effort, the hard work, the courage to try, the progress made, the child learns that their worth is not tied to victory. They grow with confidence knowing that their value comes not from beating others but from their willingness to keep going. That child grows up to be resilient, secure, and motivated not by external validation but by an inner sense of purpose.
Recognition is powerful because it shapes behavior. People repeat what is rewarded. If only winners are recognized, people will focus narrowly on winning, often at the expense of growth, learning, and collaboration. But if effort, courage, and persistence are also recognized, people are more willing to engage in the process itself, knowing that their contribution matters regardless of the outcome. This is how cultures shift, how communities thrive, how organizations grow. Recognition stops being about a single person at the top and becomes about the collective act of doing.
When recognition shifts, it also changes how we see ourselves.
We no longer measure our worth solely by victories, but by our willingness to keep showing up. We begin to celebrate ourselves, not just when we achieve something big, but when we take small steps, when we push through doubt, when we refuse to quit. That internal recognition is powerful because it sustains us in the long stretches when wins are scarce. It reminds us that doing itself is valuable, that effort itself is meaningful, and that we are worthy of celebration simply because we chose to try.
When we talk about legacy, we often think about the people who won the champions, the record holders, the innovators whose names live on in history books. But the truth is, legacies are not only built by winners, they are built by doers. The people who dared to act, who kept moving forward, who made progress even without a guarantee of victory. These are the individuals who change the culture, who shape communities, who inspire others long after their time. A legacy of doers is not measured in trophies or titles, but in the ripple effect of effort and courage that encourages others to take their own first step. A legacy of doers begins with redefining what is worth honoring. Winners may inspire admiration, but doers inspire action. Think of the countless teachers who spend decades shaping young minds. Most of them will never win awards or be publicly celebrated, yet their legacy is profound. Every student they encourage, every spark of curiosity they ignite, every moment they choose to show up and give their best effort adds to a legacy that far outlasts recognition. These teachers are doers. Their influence lives on in the actions of those they taught, in the lives those students go on to impact. This is the essence of a legacy that cannot be erased. When we celebrate doers, we create cultures that value persistence, resilience, and courage more than results. Imagine a workplace where recognition isn't reserved for the person who closed the biggest deal, but also given to the one who consistently showed up with ideas, who encouraged their teammates, who gave effort even in small, unnoticed ways. In such an environment, people begin to see that what matters most is participation, contribution, and steady action. Over time, this builds a culture where doing becomes the standard, where progress is celebrated, and where people no longer wait for the perfect moment to act. That culture itself becomes a legacy passed on through the behavior of everyone it touches. Doers also create legacies because they model courage. Starting something without the assurance of victory is an act of bravery. Others see that bravery and feel permission to act themselves. Consider the first person who spoke out against injustice in their community. They may not have won in the traditional sense. They may not have ended the problem immediately. But their act of doing, standing up, raising their voice, opened the door for others to follow. The ripple effect of their courage creates a movement, and that movement becomes a legacy. It is not the single act of winning that is remembered, but the act of doing that inspired countless others to act.
A legacy of doers reminds us that success is not always visible. It is not always about who gets the medal or whose name appears in the headlines. Sometimes, legacy is in the unseen effort, the parent who quietly sacrifices for their children, the nurse who shows up every day to care for patients, the volunteer who gives time to causes that matter. These people may never be recognized as winners, but their doing leaves a mark on the world. The lives they touch, the hope they bring, the example they set, these are the foundations of a legacy that will outlive them.
There is also a unique resilience in the legacy of doers. Winners may be remembered for their peak moment, but doers are remembered for their persistence. Their story is not one of a single shining achievement, but of steady action over time. And that steadiness has a lasting impact. It teaches future generations that greatness is not about a single moment of triumph, but about the willingness to keep moving forward, to keep contributing, to keep showing up. A legacy built on consistency and courage is far more durable than one built only on fleeting victories.
Think about the innovators whose first attempts failed. History remembers their successes, but their true legacy lies in their willingness to try again and again. Their legacy is not just the invention itself, but the example of relentless doing that inspired others to attempt their own ideas. Legacies multiply not when we celebrate only the end result, but when we honor the process, the persistence, the courage to keep trying. This is why doers leave a deeper mark. They show others how to live, not just how to win.
A legacy of doers also shifts the stories we pass on. Imagine telling the next generation not just about the ones who won, but about the ones who tried, who persevered, who refused to give up even when they did not achieve the visible prize. These stories build resilience in those who hear them. They teach that value is not tied only to outcomes, but to effort. They inspire a mindset that says, I can do something, even if I don't know how it will turn out. When stories of doers are celebrated, they create generations of people willing to take risks, to begin to stay consistent. That is how legacies expand beyond individuals and become cultural values.
Legacies built on doing also leave behind a sense of purpose. Winners may inspire admiration, but doers inspire participation. A child may look at a world champion and think, I could never be like them. But when they see someone trying, someone beginning, someone persisting despite setbacks, they think, maybe I could do that too. Legacies of doers invite more people into the story. They remove the exclusivity of success and make progress something everyone can be part of.
In the end, a legacy of doers is about impact, not recognition.
It is about the invisible seeds planted through action, the influence spread through persistence, the courage shown in simply showing up. Winners may stand at the top for a moment, but doers build the foundation on which future generations stand. They create cultures where effort is valued, where courage is admired, and where action is celebrated. And it is through that culture that their legacy lives on, not in a single moment of victory, but in a lifetime of doing.
When we look at the world around us, it's easy to be drawn toward the bright lights of winning, the trophies, the medals, the titles, the applause. But when we pause long enough, we see that true greatness doesn't live in the moment of victory. It lives in the process of doing. It lives in those who begin without guarantees, who persist with consistency, who choose courage over comfort, and who keep showing up even when recognition never comes. Celebrating only winners narrows the definition of success, but celebrating doers expands it. It creates space for more people to try, to grow, and to contribute. It shifts our culture from one obsessed with results to one inspired by effort. And in that shift, we begin to see that the real measure of a life well lived is not how many times you stood on a podium, but how many times you dared to step onto the track. Take the first step and keep moving forward. So legacies are not built only by the ones who won, but by the ones who did. By honoring the doers, we honor the spirit of courage, resilience, and persistence that moves humanity forward. Because in the end, the story worth telling is not just about who crossed the finish line first. It is about the countless people who had the courage to run the race at all.